Hi, everyone. Welcome today to this conversation between me, Lloyd Nimetz, and Michael Strong. Michael is the founder of the Socratic Experience, and I'm the founder of Spike Lab. And we'll both sort of introduce ourselves a little bit and then jump into our conversation today, which will be focused. It's titled From Pressure to Purpose, Navigating Success and Wellness in High School. So we'll be focusing on a big issue right now, which is balancing a great education and the stresses that come from that with mental wellness, one of the major crises of our times, and the role that purpose plays in that. Michael and I both believe strongly in this, and it's at the center of our work. And I've never deeply talked about this with Michael, so I'm really excited to have this conversation, and it'll be about 30 minutes. And so I'm looking forward to that. So jumping in a little bit about Spike Lab. So Spike Lab is an extracurricular program that I often refer to as a startup incubator for high schoolers. We work one-on-one with high school students and help them build what are often called passion projects. Could be businesses, social ventures, artistic projects, but something that is very meaningful to them, important to them, which is this topic of purpose today. And it takes that and turns it into action, into a project, a very long-term project that had real-world impact, and they learn a lot in the process. So, that's the essence of what we do at Spike Lab. We've been doing it for almost a decade. We're one of the first, and now there are a lot of different players. And we'll get into this, but there's been a lot of controversy also. It's becoming a little more mainstream. And as such, there's two sides to the work we're doing. There's the more toxic side, where people are doing it to get into college. And there's what my focus is on is more the developmental side, which is to develop yourself, find purpose, find meaning, and learn these executive functioning skills. So we'll get into that. But Michael, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Michael Strong, founder of the Socratic Experience. We are a virtual school, grades 3 through 12, for entrepreneurial, creative, and intellectual children. So we have all of our students do entrepreneurial, creative, or intellectual projects, somewhat similar to Spike Lab, but as part of a full program, full academic program. Our elementary school, although virtual, is Montessori influenced. And then secondary program has a heavy Socratic dialogue piece. So we have 2 to 4 hours of Socratic dialogue every day. The kids love to think, talk, and argue. It also generates a lot of ideas and trains them to read difficult material and to write well. And then we work with the students to develop their interests so that by the time they're in high school, they have a sense for who they are, what they stand for, and what they want to do. So very much kind of complementary to Spike Lab, but deeply integrated into a whole grade 3 through 12 program. But it's great to be here with you, Lloyd. And I'll throw it back to you. Talk about purpose and team development vis-a-vis Spike Lab. How do you think about that?
Yeah, well, just before that, I think just as you were talking, I was thinking you should say a little more about your background. You've been doing so much, you have such a depth of experience, and maybe you could share a little bit about that for
Sure.
people.
No, yeah, thank you. I've been in alternative education for more than 30 years. I actually left Harvard at 18 to go to St. John's College, where all classes were taught Socratically because I love intellectual dialogue so much. And that led to a 30-year career creating schools based on intellectual dialogue. Uh, Small 15 to 1, thinking, talking about ideas. And then gradually, in about 20 years ago, I met John Mackey, the founder and CEO of Whole Foods. He and I created a nonprofit to promote entrepreneurial solutions to world problems. So coming out of that, I have a book called Be the Solution, How Entrepreneurs and Conscious Capitalists Can Solve All the World's Problems. So since then, I've integrated the entrepreneurial and creative projects and intellectual projects much more deeply into my work. And yeah, lots of other things out there, but that's the brief version.
Yeah, and it's for anyone who doesn't know Michael's background, like in his books, it's really incredible. So I've been very excited about this conversation. A little bit about my background. I also come at this not from an educational background. So I have more of an entrepreneurship background. I studied entrepreneurship at Stanford Business School. I've done tech entrepreneurship, tech investing. Spike Lab is sort of technically my seventh venture. I run a fund on the side. And so, I've mostly been working in ed tech and traditional education models, but very focused on entrepreneurship education specifically. Great. So I think jumping in the role of purpose, to follow the Socratic method, maybe I'll ask you a question, Michael. What does purpose mean to you in the context of your work? It's one of these terms that's thrown around, purpose and passion, and what does it actually mean? Let's just frame the definition a little bit.
Yeah, well, first, I'll focus on the fact that I think for the vast majority of students in certainly secondary school, I think one of their challenges, they don't have a sense of purpose. They don't feel connected. Doing whatever they're doing in school is not part of a goal that they own, that they belong. As an educator, I would say my very top priority is getting to students to have a sense of their own life and what they want out of an education. I want them to have a destination. So just to give you a little bit of framing around that, one of the exercises we like to do is we like to have students write an autobiography from the age of 100, which in some ways is a little bit scary, but I want them to think beyond what are they going to do for fun this weekend to what is their life about? And it's a difficult assignment. When they're young, it's sometimes silly, but we want that kind of reflection. We also use, there's a graph called from the website Wait But Why called Your Life in Weeks. And it shows really how few weeks we have in our life,
Mm.
And, once you realize you only have a limited number of weeks and days and minutes, that provides a bit more urgency if you're thinking about what does my life stand for. Finally, I teach a purpose class where we talk about what do you love, what are you good at, what does the world need, and what will the world pay for? And students kind of look from 100 different directions, each of those questions. So we want students to connect their life's meaning with what they're doing now. And then we create an educational program customized around, do they care more about family or travel or money or making the world a better place or the environment or animals or whatever it is. I describe our secondary program as the conscious development of personal identity, which is a mouthful. But in a world with so much chaos, basically, I want them to think about who they are and who they want to become. And then from that, what impact they want to have on the world. And that then goes to what kind of skills. Do they need code? Do they need to become a leader? Do they need to work with people? Again, I can't emphasize enough, this is a long process. It's not like you can take an 8th grader and say, what's your purpose? We create a social environment where the goal of that environment is for us all as a community to be thinking about who we want to be when we grow up, what we want our lives to stand for, with no shame about not having figured it out either. Again, I want to emphasize that it's important not for this to be high pressure, but just a natural, organic conversation among a warm community about how do we create meaning and purpose in our lives. So how do you, yeah.
I mean, I just want to say I just get chills hearing that from a school leader. Because I think that's the biggest thing missing in our educational system are from the top down people who put purpose at the center of education. I haven't heard the term that you just used, conscious development of, what is it?
Personal identity.
What, intentional?
Personal identity, the conscious
Personal
development.
identity, yes. And that's that intentionality that we talk about like a lot at Spike Lab that I guess I want to frame it. I find in my work that a lot of families don't quite get it. They see it as a nice to have, not a need to have. And I think it's because they're not connecting it to the problems that they feel. So I just want to like the two big problems that I see that purpose helps solve, that people don't quite realize. One is the why question you hear from every student. Like, why do I have to study this? Like, well, why does this matter? And every teacher is like, well, it's on the test. And that's because the education wasn't like curriculum isn't traditionally designed for for a student to find meaning in it. Like the why starts to make sense when you're connecting the curriculum to something that matters to you. And so it should be designed that way. And not to get into a history lesson, and I'm no expert, but like, you know, the five major topics in or subjects in school, you know, math, science, you know, et cetera, they were developed in, you know, sort of during the Eisenhower period as part of to make the nation more competitive. So a lot of like home economics, a lot of things were taken out to create the mathematicians and scientists to compete with. Anyway, so like it wasn't designed necessarily for individuals to find purpose, and I think we need to sort of fix that for various purposes. The other problem is, I mentioned earlier, the mental health crisis facing teenagers. The Surgeon General in 2021 said it was the crisis of the time. So the US chief doctor, you know, looking at the hard data, is saying this is like the biggest crisis. And the numbers are crazy. According to CDC, I was reviewing the numbers before this conversation, this is the CDC report in 2021, before the epidemic, before COVID. 40% of high schoolers reported feeling hopeless or sad. 30%, a little more than 30%, were experiencing poor mental health, 20% contemplating suicide, and 10% attempted suicide. I don't know the numbers on how many actually, what percent of attempted suicides actually go through, but we've all seen it. My daughter, it's very personal for me because my daughter's at a magnet public school in New York City. She's a third grader, but 2 10th graders killed themselves this year alone in 1 year. And the whole school, you know, it's awful. So this is real, and we're doing the work. So, you know, as professionals, I feel very like we can't get this wrong. You know, I don't want to be part of the wrong side of history. So I do feel very passionate about this. I know I'm talking a lot, but one thing that I've thought about, like, it's the balancing act when you do need to push yourself to get a great education, right? You want to go past your comfort zone. Good education is always about going beyond what you know, what's comfortable, in order to learn more. And so the more you push yourself, it doesn't feel good. It's uncomfortable. It's hard. And the further if you're constantly pushed there or pushed too far, like in yoga, if you stretch too much and it snaps, like that creates this, in my mental model, that creates this mental illness that's happening, anxiety and too much stress. But a little bit's okay. And so all this competitiveness and all this stuff pushing kids too far, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't be pushed. And so I think that balancing act is just so hard to get right all the time when there's so much competitiveness going on. But I don't want to throw like for my work, like we're all about pushing kids really hard and far to do incredible things that they're so proud of, and it changes their life forever. But if you push them too hard, it can definitely be bad for them. So we really struggle with that. I'm just wondering how you experience that in a school setting and over your
Yeah.
lifetime.
No, great question. First, I want to go back to the mental illness thing first.
Yeah.
It's relevant. So William Damon is a researcher at Stanford, and for decades he's talked about and researched the role of purpose in adolescent resilience and addressing challenges of all sorts. And not surprisingly, but it's nice to have a research basis for this. Purpose-driven young people are much more resilient in the face of all kinds of challenges. And so I think one of the ways to reduce the adolescent mental health crisis is to give more young people a sense of purpose. I would say the other thing that purpose does is it is motivating. So if you're doing a task because you want to do it to achieve a goal that you believe is important to you, it's very different than doing hours of homework because somebody else told you you need to do it to get good grades to go into college or whatever. And so what I see is when with our students who are most successfully purpose-driven, motivation is no longer a problem. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I have a student who raised more than $1 million of venture capital at the age of 16. He works all the time. As an adult entrepreneur, I work all the time. I do what I love what I do, and I'm working all the time. But because I love it, it's different than somebody else forcing me. So, obviously he wants to be successful, have a great company, but he's doing what he loves and he loves what he does. I've got another student who is working with a gaming company on recruiting influencers and brands, and he is commission based. He actually turned down at 16 a salary of $140,000 a year because he knew he'd do better than that on commissions. He's working all the time, but again, he loves what he does and does what he loves. So, under the right circumstances, when we're just trying to achieve goals that we care about, the whole motivation thing disappears. I think a lot of the stress comes from we feel as if we're obligated to do things we don't care about for some extrinsic goal that's down the road, 2, 3, 4, 6, 10 years. And that's really hard because we don't have the mental resilience and validation and really just well-being that comes from having a sense of purpose on the one hand, and yet we still have to grind through work that's stressful and is being judged by other people. Do one more piece, then I turn it back to you, which is I find that as we help students develop their own sense of purpose, they go in multiple different directions. And so they're not racing just one race. And it turns out that having a great entrepreneurial or creative project is immensely valuable in college admissions. So even with the stress of college admissions, they can either play the game that all the other students are playing and not be distinctive in any way, and perhaps not do as well as they want vis-a-vis other students, or they can be doing something completely different, be a standout on college admission applications by doing what they love. It's a man named Cal Newport who has a book called How to Be a High School Superstar. And he talks about the Zen valedictorian, where you just calm down and design your life, design your high school experience. So it's based on pursuing things that you care about as opposed to what you don't care about. In some ways, it's a simple solution to a complex problem, but that's why we spend so much time getting to a deeper sense of purpose, because if you can get students there, it unlocks both happiness and motivation.
It's amazing to hear. We're so like this is the second time we met, right? But we're reading the same things, and Cal Newport, that book is, X'd up in my house. And I went to Stanford, I met Bill Damon in person, and we've talked a bunch. And his research, he's sort of the godfather of, as you know, but just mentioned the godfather of purpose research, like the more scientific approach to it. And it's really interesting research that's impacted my work too. Yeah, I mean, one person, Daniel Blink, it's an older book, but it focuses on motivation, talking about, I think that motivation is 80% of education. I think a lot of ed tech and a lot of people miss sight of that. And I mean, 80%, some huge number is what I'm trying to say. And it's a lot of people don't focus on that part, but that's the magic of a great teacher who's able to connect and turn you on. I think anyone who thinks about what really mattered in their education, you think about a teacher who lit you up and got you going, and that ultimately is motivation. It comes from different places. It's very relational on one side, but it's also what you're talking about, this purpose side of it, and helping people find that purpose and then unlock it and realize that it's there, and it makes for a much more fulfilling, meaningful life. It puts a why into the work, and everything comes alive around that. That's what I experienced when I started to find, sort of find my why, as I say it, and start to do all the work around it. And I think that's where a lot of people are lost. Like they're sort of aimless, trying to get into college and thinking that's the road to success. But, once you get there, there's the next rung on the ladder, the next rung, and eventually you hope. What I see from young people and older people is they hope to stumble upon purpose. And eventually the traditional model is you get it from your family, which is evolutionarily sort of the way purpose was wired in to our lives, and you know, spiritual, religious for many people, but less and less so. And that's why the more secular population has higher rates of depression and mental illness, because they don't have that component. I'm not religious, but I
Yeah.
recognize that fact.
Yeah, no, it's huge. And that's why I can emphasize it's a long process. If you don't have, an external, in some ways I see religion as almost an external sense of purpose that is, and I have huge respect for people who have that, but I'm also secular. And so this is where we want students to spend time really, because I think everybody does want to be meaningful. I think going a little bit to one of your other topics, I think part of happiness is being valuable to other people in a community of some kind. And it can be your school, an online community, it can be your local community, it can be, but I think being valuable to other people, adding value to the lives of other people is really important. And Maria Montessori had a concept of valorization where she believed that adolescents needed to be valuable in their communities, that that was a natural, I would say an evolutionary part. At the age of an indigenous traditional society, 12, 13, a young man would go out and hunt his first deer, and a young woman would be part of her community, and they would start to take on some role in the society. And I think part of the lack of purpose is teens know that they have no useful function. Actually, I think extracurriculars are more better at that than school is, because, if you're part of the school play or you're part of the football team or the debate competition, then you are, bringing pride to your school and your community, and you're performing. But just getting a class and getting a grade, you do not add value to the community. And I'm very big on teenage work because I think we all want to be valuable. And so I like to have kids think about how they want to add value to others and the importance of that. And I think that once they realize, and you'll create a social environment where, of course, we want to be valuable in our communities, however we define that, then, I think almost inevitably part of your purpose is how can I add value? As an entrepreneur, adding value to customers. If you don't add value to customers, you're out of business. So thinking in terms of what does it mean to add value to the lives of others. So we're working with John Mackey of Whole Foods. The whole conscious capitalism is leading from a place of purpose. People don't always see that in business, but I would say whatever we're doing, let's have a purpose that is in some ways contributing value. And then that flips everything around.
Yeah, 100%. Just reflecting on that. I mean, at Spike Lab, that's literally the core challenge that our whole program is developed around, is the challenge to each student that comes in, say, you can do anything. You just have to go out and contribute in some way to have impact in your community, in the world, in any form. And it has to be something that you actually care about, right? Because caring is meaning, and that's it. And it's that simple. And that's our whole thing. And then, of course, like figuring out what that is, figuring out a project that's feasible, how to launch it, develop it, that gets into the work. But when I say put purpose at the center of education, I think that's what's needed. And I just echoing, kind of looping back on some of the things you're saying, is this sort of echoes some of my conversation recently with Jennifer Wallace, who wrote Never Enough, this new book that came out that's on a similar topic of toxic, high achieving school environments, and and her answer to that is in mattering, right? This psychological concept of mattering, which is exactly what you're saying, is students feeling a sense that they matter in their community. And that's just wired into our tribal, again, evolution of being part of a tribe, feeling like you matter. And now students are so focused on themselves. Like, it's so like they're alone in this world, and COVID accentuated that, because you're literally alone. And just like, it's all for your own grades, and you just don't feel like part of a team. And it's just all for your own education, which is great to a point, but if you don't carve out a space to contribute back, people feel aimless and lost. So I think that's big part of what's happening. And then the question is, how can I guess I want to ask you is how do you do this? I mean, you've mentioned a little bit, but you know, I live outside the school system, right? My Spike Lab, it's outside students, and one of our challenges is to make sure students they do have enough time to do this kind of work if the school isn't supporting it themselves, which most are not. But you are, which is kind of amazing. And one of my goals is to be part of basically having your model propagate throughout all educational modeling or you know, pedagogy. Do you see that being feasible? What are the challenges in implementing it?
Yeah, no, lots and lots of challenges to be sure, but just kind of going back to how to, when I interview a student for our school, one of the first things I ask is, what do you love? And often kids are shocked. They've never had anybody, especially interviewing for school, it's like, you know, what are your grades and test scores kind of thing. I always ask, what do you love? What do you care about? Um, and it's interesting, some kids already have a well-developed sense of who they are and where they're going, but a lot of kids don't. Maybe they like to play video games. I said, what do you do in your spare time? Maybe you play video games. Well, what do you like about that? And again, I want them to come from something that's valuable to them.
Mm.
And then, you know, our mentorship, every student meets 30 minutes every 2 weeks with a mentor. And so you have an adult who's, in a way, constantly helping them think about what do they care about in this world. So we have a personal growth session, whereas every day 15 students conversation on how do you set goals, how do you learn from your mistake, that kind of thing. So we've got baked into our program an hour of personal growth every day that's kind of about figuring out purpose. In our Socratic discussions, just exploring the truth of good and the beautiful in classic texts. How do you think about, you know, what's the good life? The mentorship every 2 weeks, one-on-one. Then we also have electives which often have digital skills. A lot of the kids are into digital skills to actually learn how to do stuff. But then the final piece is a lot of trial and error. And this goes back to your point about space. Kids need a lot of space to try things. None of us knows if we'll like something or not until we've tried it. So I'll give you one example. And I think this is actually one of the pressure. Often students feel, oh, I have to do a project. Oh my gosh, what's my project? Like, no, let's just try something and see if it works for you. I had one girl who, what did she care about? She cared about, you know, wildlife extinction. And so she was trying to make sure the lemurs of Madagascar did not go extinct. So she spent a year reaching out to scientists and researching and fundraising and all this. And at the end of the year, it was just too big a problem. She couldn't have an impact and she was exhausted. So the next year, she handed out, she raised money and handed out tampons for homeless women. A much smaller project, super local, but manageable, and something where she could kind of see direct impact locally. And then, you know, so that was satisfying, but very small. And then the third year, she apprenticed as a midwife, totally different, but again, something tangible where she could feel her impact, you know, right there in front of her. And so, and then she went off and, you know, studied midwifery. So I think a lot of this is students do need to try different things and see what works for them. I had a different student who was all about sales and entrepreneurship and was kind of hard driving until his second semester senior year when he decided he wanted to write a novel. So he stopped all of his entrepreneurial projects and actually wrote an 80-page remarkably good novel. And so I think the other thing is having this realization that the important part comes from within, and that we as educators are there to support what's important to you, and that can change. I think for a variety of reasons, all of us, we get our notion that this is what I am, or this is what I need to do, and sometimes turns out that's not, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I found the same thing as fluid. Identity is fluid. Like, and you know, I always say we have millions of identities, and some are strong, weak, and different levels of strength in our core identity. But and they get when something gets triggered by war or by, you know, racism or whatever it is, it becomes heightened. But it can change, and that's totally fine. But to be aware of it, especially in adolescence, which is our focus, you know, and mostly yours, like that's when people are breaking away developmentally from their parents' identity and sort of figuring out for themselves. And it's important to have that time to reflect on it.
Well, and just to kind of connect two broader themes, and thinking maybe takeaways that parents can take is,
Yeah.
I think the role of purpose is way more important than most people realize, and both on the mental health and the motivation side. But then the second thing is also that it's difficult, and difficult meaning it's going to take time and lots of conversations. And going back to the stress issue, a lot of what our mentors do with their mentees is also kind of calibrating stress. When is working too hard? When it is not working hard enough? How can you tell? You know, I think for all of us adults, uh, life balance, appropriate life balance is a challenge. And, you know, the good news is purpose can take us away from mindless distractions like scrolling on the internet. But also, if we're too ambitious, we can set ourselves up for disappointment and failure. And so this is why I had a friend once who said, entrepreneurship is the best course in personal growth you'll ever have.
Hmm.
And part of it is when you set goals as an entrepreneur, you absolutely need to work smart and hard in the right way to achieve goals. But at the same time, if you don't get that right, you can get burned out and fail because of burnout. And so you have to learn to calibrate who am I and what can I actually take? What can I actually do? And then also things like team. Where do I need somebody else to complement this? Because I just can't do this on my own. So ultimately, I see starting, and I use entrepreneurship broadly, including nonprofit, starting a project, a real world project that has impact, kind of requires that we develop in every aspect of our humanity.
Yeah, I said very well. I've dedicated my life to exactly that. I really believe that. It's actually one of the things I didn't expect when I started this. I thought it was a little more of like, 8 years ago, 9 years ago when I started Spike Lab, I thought, okay, high schoolers need like the best accelerator incubator. Take all the things from Y Combinator and Stanford Business School and all the new things we learned in design thinking, and let's get it to high schoolers because they're entrepreneurship classes, but they're not good enough. But then I realized after about, I don't know, 6 to 12 months that this was about personal growth. This was about purpose and meaning. And that was a surprise for me. And but I agree. I think that's what moves me the most in this work now, after 8 years, is seeing people come alive, find motivation, and find meaning. And just going back to one other thing you said, I just want to emphasize for people listening is the risk is much lower when you're in high school to try different things. Like you gave examples of, students, because as you get out of college, especially, like the risk is you can't switch as easily. But when you're younger, you can do these projects, you can try different things. And it doesn't just have to be trying different curriculars. And I try to pull people away from this career mindset, like, oh, I'm going to try something, to be a doctor. I'm going to try, and getting away from majors in college and away from career paths to more of like, what do you love? What do you really care about? And there are a lot of almost always jobs that you could ever imagine that align with those things that you get excited about. So, I try to help people understand that because a lot of people are stuck in sort of an older way of thinking.
Yeah, they used to say in Silicon Valley, fail faster. And I absolutely think I want my kids starting projects at 12 or 13 so they can fail at 2 or 3 projects even before they get to 16. So that, and there is no substitute for trying different things. So that's why the sooner Montessori Elementary, even have kids have this sense of independent project initiative in elementary school, then they're much more prepared to do some kind of little business project or whatever when they're 12 or 13, and they do 2 or 3 of those with whatever outcomes, and by the time they're 16 they're ready to rock and roll. And that is such a huge advantage. Whereas, yeah, if you get a kid who's for the first time trying to do something on their own initiative when they're 17 or 18, sometimes it's harder. uh, but you and I could go on a long time. It's wonderful how deeply aligned we are, and even know the same authors and books, and independently discovered. But do you want to tell us how people can get in touch with Spike Lab and know
Yeah,
what you offer?
yeah. I mean, you can check us out on our website at spikelab.com, and you can reach out and have a meeting with me or one of my colleagues to learn more and see if it's a good fit for your student. Our program is one-on-one, so we match students with really kind of incredible coaches. A lot of them are out of top business schools or creative fields. They all have real entrepreneurial experience. Um, Again, we're both, Michael and I, talking about entrepreneurship broadly in terms of just passion projects around your things you care about. So yeah, just reach out. The information's on our website, and I'd love to help figure out. It's not a fit for everyone. Our program is, it's one of, I would say, one of the top 2 or 3 extracurriculars is, if you, for us, like, but really going out, developing something over multiple years usually, has impact and is a centerpiece, just like a sport or an instrument would be in many ways. That's what your Spike project is like for our students. So that's me. And you, Michael?
Fabulous. Go to socraticexperience.com. We are a virtual school, grades 3 through 12, for entrepreneurial, creative, and intellectual kids. But I would also say I think most kids are like that before the light is taken, the light goes out of their eyes. So I've also marketed my school as "Does your kid hate school?" which may sound ironic, but a lot of kids who are creative, want to take initiative, are frustrated in school. Most of our parents are entrepreneurs or creative professionals who themselves love to do things. And so if you want your child to be in a school where your child loves what they do and does what they love and is prepared for life and college, um, please get in touch. I'm very passionate about this and want to help as many kids as possible have positive mental health and be motivated to have a wonderful life. So thanks, Lloyd. That was really fun.
Thank you, Michael. That was really fun. Let's do it again.